Hello, and welcome to Reanimated. This is the podcast about all things zombies, undead, and a little bit of coronavirus, just because we can't help ourselves. My name's Stuart. I'm one of your hosts on the West Coast. And joining me from the Eastern Coast is H.A. Conrad in New York.
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour. Welcome. Come on in. We got some, we're going to be talking about the last 3 episodes of the first half of Fear the Walking Dead Season 6, which is a mouthful. Those episodes are Honey, Bury Her Next to Jasper's Leg, and Damage from the Inside. This season, for some reason, only had 7. I think the reason is coronavirus, probably like with many things in life these days. And there is no date for when that is coming back on the air, which is a little
worrying.
Crazy. But I think it will be, based on where they left it, which was in the middle of nowhere. But we have a little bit of news to get to first, and so. Oh, AJ, why don't you kick us off with news?
It is 2020. So coronavirus, we got the second vaccine on the way, hopefully to getting approved for distribution. That's the Moderna vaccine, a little more stable and easier to transport, given that it doesn't have to be like sub 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. But so that's coming out. So that's the positive news. The bad news is that the rates are super high. We definitely hit over 300,000 deaths. And, we've got, I think, just a long way to go before everybody can get vaccinated. And there's questions about the amount of vaccine and what's happening with it. So hopefully it will continue to get, out there and we'll be in line. We're definitely far back in the line. I think you are too, probably. Are you? Or are you like kind of...
I don't know where I am. I haven't checked my status. I might be... Who knows?
And as expected, apparently in certain places, well-to-do celebs and the like are asking to jump the line ahead of frontline healthcare workers to donate to charity and things like that. So I don't think that's a great thing, not a great look, but it's not shocking. I'm actually surprised we're even hearing about it. And Dr. Fauci has assured all children around the world that he has inoculated Santa Claus against COVID.
Well,
it's okay for him to come into your house. So that's all right. But they're kind of going towards almost a full lockdown here in New York. At least that's what it sounds like. And restaurants had to stop doing the dining and all that stuff. But, onwards, we're just kind of taking it day by day here. How about you?
Same. Yeah. Nothing. No day survives.
I know.
without coronavirus, inserting itself in there somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
And also because it's 2020, a new fungus has been discovered that apparently can turn like flies and sort of insects into zombies. So that's exciting. That was my only news item that I found today.
What I didn't like about this headline was it was like, I saw a few different articles that deal with this topic, and you know what? If flies have to go, fine. But first, they came for the flies, right, HA?
Well, yeah, that's the worry, is that it's obviously not just this.
Yeah, and my other concern is this a new fungus that does this, or is this just something that was always there and scientists just discovered?
I don't know. It feels like if it was out there, they probably would have discovered it. But yeah, I guess, it just seems like it seems somewhat newer and in different places. Once again, Denmark. So, I have to say, Denmark's starting to be a little hotbed of zombie news these days with the zombie minks and things like that. So,
yeah, get it together, Denmark.
I'm not sure what's going on there, but this isn't positive. So anyway, I guess it could be that it's been around, or it could be that it's been around and hasn't been doing whatever's been happening now. So either way, I'm not excited about it, but I put it in the notes anyway.
Great. Very excited about that. Thank you for adding that to my day.
Yeah. And I think you found a couple of tidbits.
Yeah. So PBS is writing a kind of like a preview of a book by what's her name? A lady, last name Ma, I believe. The book, Ling Ma. It's a book named Severance, and it was born out of the unlikely kind of like marriage in her head of watching a lot of Terrence Malick films and then also watching The Walking Dead and thinking, how could I combine Days of Heaven and Walking Dead, and she came up with a book named Severance, which is a zombie or apocalypse survival book. So I think it has. Well, I love Terrence Malick,
Me
and
too.
honestly, I love Walking Dead, and therefore it can't go wrong, right?
This unholy union might be a good thing. Who knows?
Yep. Anyway, so that's out there, and I think we might take a look. We've both read Survivor's Song, I think is the name of the book we both read over the summer, and then promptly did not review on the podcast.
Well, we got too excited about getting into these things, and I think that's what happened.
Yeah. But then the other thing out there, which is not exciting me to talk about it at all, is this film called, what was it called?
Space Zombies from Hell?
It is a movie, using that term very loosely, called Breach. It also seems to have trailers under the name Anti-Life. And it stars Bruce Willis.
Yeah, this was interesting.
And Tom Jane.
Yeah.
And several other recognizable people. And I find this extremely concerning.
Yeah.
Because it looks so bad.
It looks pretty bad. And especially the zombies look really bad. So I'm not sure about this.
The comments on YouTube under the trailer are pretty on point. Like, I heard Nick Cage turn this down. It's one of anyway, if you feel like being sad about the state of zombie trailers in the world, go watch the Breach trailer on YouTube. It is not exciting. Wow. Anyway.
All right, but let's talk about the last 3 episodes of this Fear the Walking Dead season. And we've got a lot going on in these episodes. I actually think that, there's some there's one that's better than others or whatever, but there's and maybe again could be a commentary on what happened given the pandemic, and it felt maybe like they were stretching a little bit or stretching some things in terms of storytelling. But I did feel, especially with one of these episodes, that it kind of fell into the Fear the Walking Dead trap. Not all the walkies per se, but just sort of the circular action and sort of wringing of hands and back and forth about things that I just thought was like, I just found it particularly tiring. But let's jump into it. So we've got the first episode, which would be episode 5 of the season, is Honey, and that is it's directed by Michael Satrazemis, right? And then so let's hop into it. And this is where we've got our whole reunion with Sherry. We've got a couple of happy moments Dwight has with Sherry, and this was the thing I was talking about. And especially how they treated this episode, where I had these moments in the last episode when she appeared, and then even a little bit in this episode about whether Dwight was actually, this was actually happening, or whether Dwight was like maybe hallucinating this. And that's kind of how it opened up. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was almost like too good to be true, basically. And it had a bit of a dreamlike quality. Like, this is all that Dwight has wanted all this time. He finally gets it. And I do think that the moral of this whole storyline is like, maybe be careful what you wish for. Maybe the things that you are like sort of thinking about, or the ideal and the pedestal you're putting somebody on, isn't exactly what it actually is, or maybe they've changed or that kind of thing. So, so I was feeling a lot of those feels during this particular episode.
Yeah, I got yes, and definitely be careful what you wish for. I think that's probably the good motto for this episode, and it really does feel like Dwight does not get, and Sherry don't get very long to enjoy each other's company, even though they've actually had
seconds.
A week.
No,
by there's only seconds in the episode, but they do describe it later as they've been together for a week, shacked up in their candle lit studio apartment or whatever this place is with all the drafts. However, the end of that initial scene where Sherry goes into the kitchen for a fork, and then she's part of the group that comes and
Right.
abducts
And this
Dwight, and
just
yet the
seems
way it goes down is super
very,
unnecessary.
very odd.
Yeah,
And this was the part where it's like suddenly it was silent. She was gone. And
it's
this was,
creepy.
it's very creepy. And so this was the part where I was like, oh, maybe she's actually not there. Maybe this isn't real. But then clearly that's not what happened. She's with this group of people who wear these incredibly freaky little masks, which I have to say, where on earth have they all found such freaky little masks going
Yeah.
on? They're
There's a
kind
freaky
of,
mask store in town
I mean,
somewhere.
seriously, I don't know if I've ever seen masks like this anywhere. Anyway, they capture him, and then they've got him in this pool. I also have to say, from a tactical point of view, the echoes and the noise coming out of their particular hideout here seems to be not the best idea, given Walker, attraction to noise. But they have him, they have Al, and there's also this moment where he hears on the walkie that he's late for check-in with Virginia's people, and that Al was supposed to do that. So we already know that something's up there. And then this group turns out to be holding Al hostage, and they want information from Dwight about where Virginia is, because they want to kill her. And all of this back and forth with them just seems like really weird and not like they're gonna kill him. And then Sherry,
No, they're gonna kill Al.
No, but they're gonna kill Al. But they're also like, there's some like, even with Sherry's involvement with this seems super weird. Like, why would she do this to him? It doesn't feel. And even I'm still bothered by this, even as we go down the road with the Sherry character. And maybe she has changed and whatever. But why even bother to like reunite with him in this way? I don't know. It just felt very strange and honestly a little bit contrived, and like, okay, we're gonna create a conflict here, but this doesn't totally make sense.
This episode has a lot of this back and forth conflict creation sort of stuff, and I was very confused at first, and I might have misunderstood it when Sherry reveals herself to be one of the masked people, and I'm like, why would you have been like, yeah, let's do this weird charade for my husband, who I definitely trust and I've been with for a week, before I unmask myself.
Yeah,
and say,
agreed.
I'm one of them. It's just over the top, and it's so unnecessary. And so I thought that she described them as all like Virginia community rejects or people who have fled from her, and which made me think, so they've all been like under her thumb. They've all been part of her community. But I think later on they talk about how they are people who were dislodged by her and maybe never joined, because that would make more sense, because when they're so mad at Dwight and Al for working for Ginny, and I'm like, Ginny literally press gangs people into working for her. Why would you be like, oh, we can't trust them? Except that this season has tried to make us believe that somehow Ginny has this power to make people almost happily work for her.
Yeah.
Even though she did it, or they were forced to it under the threat of violence, and actually she killed Morgan, as far as they all know, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense. But so I was confused, like Oswald or whatever his name is, Oscar, the dark-haired guy, who was really aggro against Dwight and Al at the beginning. It's like, you worked for her. I'm like, it kind of sounds like you did too, maybe at some point. So I don't get it, but that might not have been the case.
Well, they describe them as rejects, so I think some of them are sort of people that escaped from her, but some of them are, like, I think they describe maybe they were rejected by her, but normally Virginia just kills those people, I guess. So I don't know.
Right. And when Raleigh then unveils himself in this same scene, did you need a refresher on who Raleigh was?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. What did they do this for? Twice now, 2 different characters, and it's going to keep happening as they bring in other people from the Gulch convoy.
I know.
Later on, there were like 40 people in that last season, and Raleigh wasn't even one of them. He was a bad guy. But he was the guy, I think they put in a refrigerator and left him in the middle of the road, and he's like, yeah, man, you guys saved my life. I don't really remember how his story ended, but I feel like that was where it ended, didn't it?
Yeah. There was not a lot. This is like a very, like, it's almost like we're supposed to think that this character had a lot more meaning than he did, the way they act. And
I don't remember it being positive.
It wasn't. And I also don't know that, like, I don't know. It just felt kind of like, as I said, these weirdly contrived moments that don't make sense to me and don't land, or at least it didn't land with me. Maybe I'm wrong, and I would love to hear from people who disagree on this, because maybe I'm missing something. But that just felt very strange to me. And then
Oswald also gets a line before we end this pool scene where he's like, "We needed some insurance to ensure your cooperation."
Yeah, I know. It's like, really,
like, oh,
really,
dude. I mean, I know that they purposefully wrote it that way to maybe make him sound like an idiot, but
yeah.
I don't know that was necessary.
And then we've got, and this is, I think there's just so much of this in this episode, this weird back and forth, this conflict between these two groups. I think this and I think that. And then we've got a lot of double and treble crosses that remind me a little bit of a Jason Bourne film, in that, first you don't think they can double cross each other anymore, and then another thing happens. And,
there's a lot of that, especially after Morgan gets involved, because Morgan actually not in all three, but in two of these episodes,
he's coming
Morgan shows up. He's everywhere in this second half of the season.
He's definitely omnipresent man in these episodes. And in this case, they have this whole plan to steal the SWAT truck back. And Al tells like a thinly veiled lie about, whether explosives will take care of it or not. And then they get, and they go through this whole thing. And it's I thought the scene was it was a little silly, because I just don't think horses, I don't know, maybe it was slower than I was thinking, but they have this whole horseback. It was basically a train robbery scene, or like a stagecoach scene. That's what it felt like to me, which I thought was actually a little bit Indiana Jones, and I thought that was actually a lot of fun.
Do you remember the last time Al also described her MRAP as an invincible tank, and then the door fell off at the stadium?
Yeah, totally. And
so
that's a little bit of this.
I was calling her mentally on that, and then she did later say, "I was lying.
Yeah,
dynamite might blow it up." And I'm like, okay, well, that was all right. Yeah, sure. She couldn't let them blow it up because they really want this MRAP to stay on the show, even though it's been bad. It's been a bad thing.
Yes, but they just can't. They just can't quit it.
They can't quit you, man.
So that was like kind of a fun scene, and Morgan, of course, makes his heroic entrance drag. And again, this is like such a Western kind of visual thing that they're going for here, where he's like dragging the driver, I forget the guy's name, dragging him by like with a rope. He's got his like duster on. It's pretty funny. It's a lot. And then
this scene reminded me of 2 episodes ago in The Mandalorian, where they were driving those trucks through the jungle, and the opposite thing was happening, right? So there's a lot. Yeah, obviously this is a very derivative sort of action sequence, but it was kind of fun. The one thing that I would say is the guy uses the saws, the machine guns on the side of the truck.
And they do nothing.
And it demonstrates how useless this thing is.
Totally, because they have a very narrow, you can avoid them if you really want to. If you're and that's exactly what happens here.
And you can't even move them without driving the truck and turning it. Like that's how you adjust fire, and that's an absurd thing. It does. Okay, we've already
and also let's also talk about their masks. They're all wearing masks, but Dwight's face is so damaged by that burn that even with the mask you can see who it is. There's no question about who it is, and so they're all like, "Oh my God, you let your mask fall, or the guy saw your face." And it's like the guy would have known who he was from a million miles away.
When he sees his face, he obviously has no idea who Dwight is.
Right,
he could describe him. But he doesn't. He's never seen him before. And
apparently,
I'm like, well,
all right. And so that I thought, sorry, that's an aside, but it was something that just seemed ludicrous to me. And then they bring him back, and there's this whole back and forth because they basically are threatening to torture him, threatening to attack. Basically, they're using very Negan tactics here, and that's a lot of what the conflict in this episode is. It's like, who are you now, and what are you doing? And there is the arguments between Dwight and Sherry mainly, but they're just sort of they're basically the example of the conflict between the two groups. And Morgan's got his own thing where he, I have to say, and we talked about this in the last in our last discussion, which is that Morgan's idea that they're going to go and start this whole new thing away from Virginia that Virginia will never find, is insane, because it's not a super hidden place. It's not even built up, and he's making all these promises about this place. This basically makes it sound like it's this hidden valley somewhere that they have a magical word that can hide it from Virginia and her cowboys. And so
Wakanda, this is not.
Yeah, no, it feels very strange. And so anyway, he does have some valid concerns that she's going to hurt their people. And obviously he's got a very specific concern because he, is worried about his lady and her baby, and he wants to see Grace, and that's been his motive. So it's really not as much for the big group as he would make everybody believe. But I understand that, but I am really bothered by all these huge promises that he keeps throwing out there about this.
I kind of thought it was interesting when Dwight and Morgan are having kind of one of their many arguments in this episode, and Dwight says, "Look, if Grace was asking you to do this, what Sherry is asking, or what Sherry is doing right now, don't try and tell me you wouldn't be on top of this and doing it." And I thought when Morgan was like, "Damn," at the end of that conversation, I thought he was seeing the truth of that. In fact, I think he was just seeing that Dwight was not going to be turned from this course of action, and that leads them to try to double cross him and Sherry. I also thought it was really interesting motivation that Sherry has no real personal stake in this fight against Virginia.
Nope.
Other than that she equates her with Negan, and she wants to take her down because Negan Negan destroyed her husband's persona and raped her and forced her into a marriage and all these other things.
Well, and it's also, she said outright to Dwight that she did have the chance. She could have, in her mind, she could have ended it and killed Negan because he was quite vulnerable around her, and did not take the chance to do that. So she views this as maybe a way to redeem herself over that, or maybe as a way to not continue things. Now, I will say that despite the shortcomings of Virginia's community and leadership style, this isn't the same. Generally, the things that were happening in the Negan community, not the horrific things. I mean, super horrific things are happening, but it doesn't, it's somewhat insidious because it's not quite as in your face, I think, as in
it's a little more of a white picket fence version of the Saviors. Yeah.
I mean, it's still happening, but not in the same in your face kind of way, and not with the same demonstrations of, say, burning people's faces with irons and things like that. Although she obviously did leave Janice out to be eaten by zombies. But that wasn't, a huge public thing. So anyway, this is the whole thing. And ultimately, she does, the attack doesn't happen on Virginia, but it doesn't matter because she didn't show up anyway.
Right.
And, they sort of pretend that Al and Dwight are dead. They dress up walkers like them.
I thought it was kind of interesting when Al and Morgan are like, I didn't quite understand why they were fighting so hard for Dwight not to go through with the attack.
Yeah.
Except that Virginia wasn't there, so then they should have not done it. Agreed. There's no point in killing 6 Rangers. There apparently are hundreds of Rangers. I don't know where they all are, but there's a lot more. And when Al is like, "This isn't your decision to make," to Dwight, I'm like, well, why not? Whose is it? I mean, I guess the counter argument to Dwight doing and Sherry going through the attack is they still have people inside the system.
Yeah.
But that's when there's clearly an entire rebellion out here in the wilderness. I don't think the Gulch are necessarily the first people who Virginia would turn on. By the end of this 3rd episode we're looking at today, obviously she changes. She goes for it because she decides that Morgan is still this thorn in her side.
Right.
But yeah, it's just a little odd to me that Al and Morgan fight this ambush so vehemently, but then they also are, by the end of the episode, everybody's gone off to live at the lake.
Right. And then, Dwight's leaving his little sign for Sherry to find them eventually. And they're taking some of the people from like Nora and the people from that building along with them. So, they bring them back. I have a feeling Nora is going to be maybe a bigger role since we've now seen her, but who knows? Maybe we'll see her 3 seasons from now and it'll be like, remember me? Like,
remember me? I'm Nora. But like, wait, what? Can we
Yeah.
please get a recap at the beginning of the episode?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was also a little bit thrown by Sherry's constant like back and forth between like, we've got to go after Virginia. We cannot, there's no two ways about it. But Dwight, you have to be nicer. I can't let you be a bad guy anymore. And I'm like, all right, make your mind up, dude. You either want to murder somebody or you want your husband to not be a nice person.
Right.
Yeah.
And it felt very, I'll be honest with you, just even in some of Dwight's actions, even when we saw him do the sort of quasi-interrogation that he was stopped from doing, that it was much more of a return to who he was with Negan. So
yeah, but he didn't actually hurt the guy.
He didn't, and I don't think he was intending to, but I think that's what you were trying to, that's what they were trying to do, is to draw those parallels. And so really, he is a different person with this group, and maybe he's a better person because of this group. So maybe Sherry isn't the best person for him anymore. So that's the other part of this. But, I think we're ready to jump into the next Omnipresent Morgan episode.
Wait, he's not in this episode.
No, I'm teasing. That's
He almost admitted to it, but he wasn't. Yeah.
Right. So, this is definitely a June episode. And the opening, little credit thing tells you so. And
the opening is with that lady jogging through the woods, and she's like a logger for Virginia's community. Turns out she may be associated with the End is the Beginning people, and this is kind of a scene to let you know that Virginia is leery. She's on to these people. She knows that they're out there.
Yep.
She doesn't really tell you much more than that, but she thinks that they are an existential threat to her.
And honestly,
society.
They seem pretty creepy. They're willing to kill themselves.
That was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, but I mean the opening credits when they do the art in the beginning. It's
that too.
It's June.
The picture.
So that's the sort of, we have a little bit more of the End is the Beginning people, and we don't yet know what they're doing, what their motives are, but it doesn't seem to be good for Virginia's team. And then we've got a lot of June and Sarah. They're running this really, it seems kind of crazy to me because it's like, this doesn't even make sense. They're running basically a mobile sort of medical unit.
In the back of the old freighter truck, 18-wheeler.
And they do
this is a pretty interesting scene. They try to do an emergency appendectomy on this guy. He dies seconds into it.
Yep.
And then turns in 45 seconds on screen with no cuts.
It's one of those convenient things that he turns so quickly. And this is the thing, though, and this is what bothered me about the scene. Maybe you can get that June is tired because she seems very tired, and she's upset because she feels like she's being useless and can't actually save people. In fact, in this case, she'd never done an appendectomy before, so she's like going with a book. She's having Sarah hold it for her, all this kind of crazy stuff. I'll admit I couldn't watch even the cut. It was just stressing me out quite a bit, just imagining how unsanitary this whole thing probably was. But there's no way she's not used to people dying, and she gets what that means when they die. And then Sarah basically takes out the dude, but it comes pretty close. There's like a dramatic thing where he like takes her off the table, and maybe it's just the exhaustion, but it kind of feels like she would be like, they'd probably tie people down or something, especially if they're doing this. I mean, they give him a sedative, but he's not fully out. You know what I mean? So I feel like they would have had something in place to avoid this scenario specifically, but they don't. Yeah, and that's the deal. She's exhausted and tired and feels like downtrodden. And after this, they're supposed to go on to, they kind of go from place to place. They get called where they needed, and John shows up to drive her to the next thing, and then they get called to where the oil fields are, because there's been
Tank Town.
Yeah. But in the midst of this, John Dory is looking pretty rough. we know he's in a bad way anyway mentally, given the episode about him that we saw, aside from his poor tooth, but he looks rough. And he basically tells June that he's dying and that they need to get away. He's got this whole plan to go back to his old cabin.
Where do you land on this? Jumping right to the end. I mean, we can talk about the Tank Town action and whether or not June should have done what she done, but is she right or is he right? She's like, I want to save people, I want to help people, I want a hospital, and he's like, I just need to survive, and I don't think I can survive.
I think that because he's seen more than her, he's seen how things are going, and he was especially, I mean, look, it wasn't just what happened with Janice, but it was, he basically can't deal with what is basically the Neganism of this town, the fakeness, and the kind of underlying negative and horrible thing. It doesn't jibe with his set of values. And I think that she clearly knows that based on some of the stuff we hear from her in this episode. And she knows that he's like in a crisis mode. So I think that, if you know this about your significant other, and he even says it, he gives her a chance, and again, not meaning to be to the end of this episode, but let's just talk about it. Yeah. Basically, she's not hearing what he's saying, and he basically tells her what he's going to do. So I don't think it's really surprising that he basically decides to abandon everybody and go off and maybe get his head straight, because he's basically going to his cabin, I think we can assume, because that was his plan. And June is now somehow all in because they've given her a mobile hospital. I also don't really believe that this is something that...
I think it's not a mobile. I think it's a
immobile hospital, like a center. And my issue with this is that she also knows exactly who Virginia is, and I don't think that there is any trust there, no matter what she did and no matter how she saved it. The fact is, I don't see that Virginia's unstable. So I don't know that I would put a ton of stock in any of this stuff if I were June. And
yeah, I was kind of hoping that they were going to kill off Virginia in this episode. They came very close, didn't
they? Did, but now they have cool steampunk fake hand, dude.
Oh yeah, very very steampunk slang. But they still haven't developed her enough, and so I guess they still kind of need to do that, and maybe they're going to. They hinted at some more development in the episode with Dakota that comes up next, like in terms of her backstory a little bit. But she's still like really not very, very clear as a villain, as anything, except that her motivations are muddy, and she seems to make a lot of decisions that June certainly disagrees with in this episode, where she delays the medical care of the people who are injured at Tank Town to try and get answers, because the end is the beginning is painted on something.
Yep.
And that leads to kind of a catastrophic zombie munching fest in the back of the 18-wheeler.
I mean,
which is a pretty funny kind of scene.
This part was sort of like, okay, these people, again, these people are all injured and close to death. You guys don't have some kind of mechanism to strap people down or to keep this from happening. You have been treating everybody. You know that this is a possibility, and I get that it's like a tough situation. I admit I also laughed when it turned out that basically all the people they tried to rescue were now like walkers. But it just seemed totally avoidable, and so it annoyed me because it just seemed kind of like they know better than this. But, there's that. And so the things I did like about this episode is, Tank Town is kind of blowing up all around them. I did like I thought that some of the things just in terms of with Virginia and June and them being trapped was actually kind of a cool little thing. And, it's not shocking that Virginia gets bitten and then is like, oh no, like I need to be saved. And it's kind of funny because June knows she's going to try to like cut her hand off and won't let her do it. And so I thought that was an interesting thing there back and forth. But again,
it felt like she waited too long.
Yeah,
and then also didn't cut. I would have thought by this point she'd need to cut it off either at the elbow or the shoulder. Like it seems like she cuts it very close to the bite.
She's got too much. There's too much talking. The circulation is probably not gonna be, yeah, like I agree with you. I think she definitely waited too long. But you know, they gave a little bit of backstory that we expand upon in the next episode, where Virginia's just like Dakota's everything to her, and that's what causes June ultimately to save her, and to get something she wants, which is the hospital. We also get to see Luciana in this one, and and Wes.
Luciana needs her own freaking episode. Like,
yeah, I know they waste her.
I'm so tired of her not getting like the spotlight, and I don't know if they thought like she's running Tank Town, but that, you know what, that mostly happened almost entirely off screen.
It did.
Sure, she has like 5-6 lines of dialogue in this episode, but she needs her own damn episode.
She needs her own episode, and also they need to just have her as a leader, because man, this is the person that was leading an entire like town before, and
she was like second in command to Alejandro, but still, yeah,
come on.
I take your point.
And she's such a cool character, and I agree with you. I think they waste her on this, and it's kind of annoying. And we also get the return of Wendell here, which is fun, but we see him for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And you know, like I thought that this was, at least there was some things going on this episode, but there did feel like there was a lot of filler, much like, Virginia, you're crazy. Will I, won't I kill you? You know, that kind of thing. And you know,
there's also a zombie with like razor blades taped to its fingers in this episode. There's some question marks here.
Yeah, and I think we're supposed to assume that it's the end is the beginning, people doing that this whole Tank Town thing was orchestrated by them, which is also why Virginia's in a tizzy, and she's assuming that that Wes did this because he had art supplies, and so that's the insane thing.
They were mentioning Wes a few times when they were running into Tank Town, and I was like, all right, I give up. Who the hell is Wes? You know, he was the Raleigh for me for this episode. But then I see him and I'm like, oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
no,
Wes.
he was a main part of their little crew. So that's, you know,
sort of.
But in any case, we go on to this next episode, which is the last one of the season. This is the damages from the inside, and so we've got another appearance by Dakota. She's in a convoy, being led by Strand, or being sort of the commander is Strand for this case, and we don't know. I mean, I guess she's being brought to a safe house. I don't even know why, but we've got a lot of the Rangers here. And it quickly devolves into this melee. So the Rangers all end up as walkers. There's clearly some subterfuge going on here. And when he goes to help, and when he comes back, Dakota is missing. And we see the car that she was in, it's empty. There's lots of stuff all over it. Like, you know, so there's a question about whether she got attacked or not. And then, of course, Strand and the Ranger with him are freaked out because obviously Virginia's going to probably kill them if Samuels is the name of the other Ranger. Like if she realizes her sister is out there or being kidnapped or whatever, and because she's going to blame the people that were in charge of it. And obviously, Strand enlists the help of Alicia and Charlie to find Dakota, conveniently.
Obviously?
No, I'm saying it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Strand... Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense that he would bring her into this after the way he treated her, and it backfires in the way that should have been extremely transparent to him based on how their last interaction went, where he sends her away and it's like, you're not my friend anymore, basically. That I have to be someone else now, and that can't happen with you around, and blah, blah, blah.
But also, if it's the whole thing where he's trying to keep her safe and he's dragging her back into the Virginia stuff, that's the antithesis of what he was trying to do in the first place. So that seems silly. And, you know, they go off and suddenly Alicia is like an expert tracker and can find people in this way, which I thought was like, you know, okay. She's got her little gun, whatever her little stabby thing is.
Browning barrel. Yeah.
And Charlie is, you know, Charlie's there right alongside her. I do like how they're making Charlie a little bit more grown up. But she doesn't have a ton of lines. She isn't as sassy as she was even as a little kid.
But she does come through with some pretty clutch stuff in the middle of this episode. It's just that she doesn't find the vein, but she like basically she takes out
The bad guy. Yeah.
the bad guy. Not 100%, but it's a pretty sweet move. And I was like, yeah, that's Charlie. That's her.
Yeah, and so I was glad to see that. Let's talk about some terrifying things in this episode. So
this was definitely, they were trying to channel some horror, right?
Yeah. This is like definitely like Island of Dr. Moreau crap.
Yes, I was. But when they finally did the reveal on all the adjusted zombies, I was like, this is super Moreau.
And they've seen them. They've seen the zombies. They're like all sort of like mutated. There's like animal parts on them, antlers, all sorts of weird things going on. And the explanation for this is kind of insane anyway. And like, I don't even know. But basically, Alicia finds this old lodge and goes in and, finds the one squeaky board. And she sees this dude basically augmenting walkers in a creepy ass way, and while looking for Dakota. And ultimately, like seriously, in terms of like horror, this is one of like the things I like. Like the idea of somebody being incapacitated in this way and then being strapped to a table, I think speaks to many people's fears of not being in control and being under the control of somebody else that's totally nuts. And so when they have Alicia wake up on the slab, I did not think that things were going to go the way that they did. Like, it felt like things were going to be really upsetting.
Like she would suddenly have antlers on her head. Or
something that it was, it's quickly turning into this torture porn, which is a horror element, a genre that I really freaking hate. But in any case, no, he was just, putting her out to calm her because he thought she might be one of the bad people looking for Dakota. And then, there's this whole back and forth in this house. They can't get out. It's all blocked up.
He's boarded them in.
Yeah.
But not before Charlie has snuck in, because Alicia left her out in the woods and was like, don't come in, or I forget what her instructions were.
Yeah.
But Charlie, of course, is like, I'm going to go in. And then she's in there, but he doesn't know that she's in his house for the longest time, like a day and a night or something.
Yep. There's a long time where Charlie's kind of sneaking around in this very, finite amount of space. So as it turns out, he's just, a friendly little taxidermist who had hidden out here with his wife and his daughter and just decided to augment things to keep people away, so he said. But I think he's just doing these because he's weird.
Yeah. No, he's way too into it, too.
Yeah. And
I don't know that I ever really bought he was not such a bad guy thing.
No,
by the
I
end
don't
of this
either.
episode, other than his superhuman ability not to die when he's impaled by a giant like ox horn.
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense. It's like having a full conversation and standing up and talking to Alicia. I'm like, dude, you're not standing up. You have a thing through your chest.
Yes, you're done. Who knows which organs those have impaled?
Most of them, I think.
But then I will say the camera work and making this all seem like a horror film is great. The lighting is great. The angles are great.
Super dark. Yeah, it's a very dark episode.
It is a really dark episode. And you never fully, I mean, look, how can you ever fully trust a dude that straps somebody to a table and like puts them out with sedative? Like you're never going to fully trust him. Even if the dude had lived, I think you're always going to be giving him a bit of side eye.
But when they decide to stay there overnight, which is they're like they explain to him that he's Dakota's Virginia's sister. They have to go or she's gonna come after her and blah blah blah. And he seems to accept that, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
Alicia, I think at this point it's clear what they have to do, which is stay awake all night. Like there's no way you go to sleep in this house.
No.
And Alicia is even like, you go to sleep, Dakota. I'm gonna keep watch. First thing, of course, that she does is not keep watch over Dakota and goes into the radio room and tries to make this deal, Dakota for Charlie and Alicia's freedom. Not a bad deal. Kind of sucks for Dakota, who is literally just like a teen girl and not cool Alicia. But, them's the stakes. But then Alicia, after making that radio call and not changing the channel, which gets her in trouble later, she passes out on the couch. Just she and Dakota are just asleep. Charlie is apparently like in a room pacing somewhere.
Yeah.
Which again is just kind of a funny thing to me. Is like poor Charlie. She's not exactly keeping watch, but she is smarter than Alicia in not going to sleep.
Yeah, and Charlie has a plan. She takes it upon herself to sedate Ed And she's like, all right, we're getting out of here now. and she doesn't hit the vein, I guess. So that makes it, that makes it more difficult. But, at least Charlie's trying to get things done, and she does it a lot more. Clearly, she's able to be a lot more stealthy than Alicia has been this entire time. And in the end, we do, Ed is sort of much like, he becomes the victim of his own creatures, though he seems to kind of embrace it in a creepy ass way.
Yeah, that was his idea of quote unquote slowing them down, was just to be like, eat me.
Everybody eat me with my antler, and they all surround him in their creepy augmented way. But, Alicia and Charlie and Dakota run into Morgan and Strand, and this is again
cabin. It was amazing that people hadn't found it sooner, because then everybody was finding it.
Yeah, suddenly it's like on the map. But there is there is that whole, once again, it's the same debate as we saw in the last episode, which is this whole, do we kill Virginia? Don't we kill Virginia? Do we go and start our own thing, or don't we? Do we use do we use Dakota's bait or not? And, ultimately it just puts the old team members against each other. And look, I have to feel like they have to have some better communication skills. And ultimately, Strand's idea was to try to keep the whole group safe. So I don't believe that this is ultimately where he's going to go. And I think we're meant to believe, bad Strand's back. I think he still has a few different tricks up his sleeve because he's Strand.
He certainly feels by the end of this episode where he's like crowing about, very pregnant Grace and saying, who do you want next? And he feels he's selling it very well.
Oh, he's selling it well, but I still don't believe that this is what's going to ultimately happen. I think that's what they want us to think. We do get to see pregnant Grace, which is great. And, Virginia suddenly has all of her trust in Strand, which I think is really odd. But okay. And
it just makes her seem desperate and way, like, even less organized and less of a leader, a potential leader for this group.
Although
Hill is a way scarier dude than she is, it seems like, just mostly because of his aspects. I think.
Now she has her little punchy leather metal hand. I mean, come on, that's pretty badass.
That. But it just feels like it's her, Hill, and that other guy Marcus who yelled at Alicia and Strand at the beginning of the show.
Yeah,
and it doesn't. Yeah, there's not enough there. Not enough.
They haven't done a good job at developing her as a character. And I mean, even in this episode, we hear from Dakota that Virginia killed their parents. Well, we don't know whether Virginia killed their parents because they were walkers or what. We don't know whether her parents were abusive, which is something, given Virginia's behavior, would probably make sense.
Yeah.
But, I agree with you. I think that they have not done an incredibly good job at making her character. It's just it's a very superficial character. We don't understand, and maybe that's what they're waiting for. But I feel like even when we saw her in the last season, it was incredibly weird that she would be putting this much effort into trying to tamp down this group of people. When honestly, look, even with the places that they have going on, they are on horses. They don't have the resources that, say, the CRM does. And yet they try to make you think as if she and her people are all seeing, So it's this weird dynamic where either she is or she isn't, but they don't know. It's almost like they can't decide what kind of a villain she is. Is she a delusional villain who just thinks she has this power, or does she actually have this power? I don't know. It just doesn't sit well, and it kind of doesn't make and because of this, you don't know really what to think about it in terms of the show. So
she's having to make a lot of deals in these last two episodes. One with Alicia, obviously, where she agrees, without really hesitating for too long, for Dakota in exchange for Alicia and Charlie to go free. And then in the previous one, she makes the deal for the hospital, kind of on pain of death.
Right.
And I would say the Tank Town episode definitely does develop her better than any other one we've seen, because she talks about. She's mindlessly or one-track mindedly going after the information on the end as the beginning people at the expense of the lives of her community, which then she also is like, all I do is, everything I do is for the community, et cetera, et cetera. You don't really believe that because we're seeing that she's just let 30 people die or so.
Right.
So there is development there, but it's also just like not strong enough. I think it's a little wishy-washy, even though I'm glad to see her character getting more lines and to say things that are morally ambiguous, because that helps you with her development, even though it's not clear if she's a good guy or, well, she's definitely not a good guy, but how much of a bad guy she is.
Well, and then the other thing that just kept sort of resonating with me when we saw her in Tanktown, and then also this particular episode, is that she relies on people's quote unquote loyalty. Well, and we know from all of this whole season, and from what we've seen about the different denizens of her little civilization, that she's kind of forced these people into this. So there's no such thing as loyalty from people that you're forcing into positions they don't want to be in. So even like the stuff with even dealing with June and dealing with John Dory and dealing with Strand, I don't believe that she would have this trust in them that she purports to have.
No.
Because even with John Dory, he was, kind of defying her and doing this investigation, even though she didn't want him to. She used him as a tool in order to do something she wanted to do and to make an example out of Janice. But it's sort of like you're going to constantly have these little rebellions. And as we see with the end is the beginning people, this is something that bothers her tremendously and it's upsetting to her. So I don't feel like she would have trust in anybody. So I don't know. It's an odd thing that I'm trying to see where they're going with it, and maybe when they eventually start, when we get to see this again, who knows when, maybe they will flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think they've built up this key community as this like really spread out, widespread group of different outposts and compounds, and that is like also its greatest weakness. She has like access to a real wide variety. She has an oncologist, for instance, and she has her mobile medical truck with June and Sarah at the beginning of the second episode we talked about. But also, the end is the beginning. People are infiltrating not only her mill but also the tank town, and so it's like the community is vulnerable in a way that seems really easy to fix, which is consolidate.
Right.
And she clearly is not going to consider doing that. It's also really weird at this point in the season that we haven't met an end is the beginning person who hasn't been killed.
Right.
And so I don't know how they're going to develop that faction.
Well, and we don't know we know sort of what they're about, but we don't know exactly what they're about. I mean, the razor blades on the walkers and some of the ways they've been, destroying a resource like Tanktown seems kind of crazy to me, given that maybe you want to use that resource for yourself. But I'm sure we'll find out more about them in the next season. But they've started to, I think that they're just sort of hinting at that, so that will be maybe the main big bad in the next season.
Oh, it better be. And I think we've got 9 episodes probably, I hope, in the next half of the season. Yeah. We don't know when that's going to come. There's a few loose ends that I think it's going to be really important for the writers and the showrunners to underscore and draw links back to, December of 2020, whenever they get around to putting out the next episodes, because we're going to have this problem with Raleigh and Janice all over again. It's going to be like, oh, I was the man with the knife who killed Cameron. And we're going to be like, who?
Who's
Cameron? So, and if they even decide to show us who was the murderer of Cameron and that led to Janice's death, et cetera, well, we might never get that. And that's kind of the feeling I have, is that this show might just never tell us who done it. And
that's totally possible. But anyway, I would love to hear what people think about these last 3 episodes. So if you have thoughts, send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or leave us a note on the site, reanimatedpodcast.com, or you can tweet at us. reanimatedpcast is the handle. And I guess, what are we talking about next time?
Oh, good grief. Well, we had...
we can talk about...
There's Alone, I think, or is it Alive? The one of that movie that was out that we could. There's that movie.
What movie?
Is it Alone or Alive? The one with Donald Sutherland.
Oh yeah, did we already watch that?
We watched the Korean version of it. Well, next time we're going to be doing something, and you will find out what it is when we do it.
Yeah. But in the meantime, thanks for listening, and hope everybody has like a nice holiday. Ciao.
Thanks. Bye.